Heyo, busy brain. Welcome to the Busy Brained Saint podcast, where faith meets focus. I'm Camden Hainsworth, an expert ADHD coach, here to help you understand your mind with confidence. God knows your brain perfectly, so let's explore that divine design together and discover just how fulfilling your life can be, living with God and ADHD. Every brain experiences life and faith a little differently. For those of us with ADHD, that difference can feel challenging, even frustrating. When we struggle to focus in prayer, read our scriptures, or follow through on spiritual or personal goals that we know matter, ADHD isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It's not a lack of desire, faith, or even intelligence. It's simply that your brain works differently, uniquely wired, in ways that can make staying on track feel impossible sometimes. That's why I created Mindful, a faith-affirming ADHD group coaching experience for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and their friends who relate to having this busy brain experience. Since 2019, I have put thousands of hours of work into understanding the ADHD brain, including hundreds and hundreds of hours coaching ADHD clients, helping them learn how to work with their brains rather than against them, to move from feeling scattered and overwhelmed to grounded, confident, and Christ-centered. In Mindful, we go deep. We explore how our ADHD brains experience the gospel, prayer, service, relationships, and goals. We learn to regulate our emotions, build habits that stick, and create rhythms of peace and purpose in our discipleship. And we do it together, in community, because healing, growth, and true change happen best when we're supported by others who get us, who understand what life with a busy brain is really like. It isn't just about productivity or coping skills, it's about seeing your brain as God sees it. I invite you to join us in Mindful. Click in the episode description to learn more and start stepping into a faith-filled, grounded, and empowered way of living with ADHD. Hello, you made it. I'm so happy that you are here. My brain is busy and my heart is full. Today's podcast episode is titled Traveling Internationally with ADHD. We're going to be talking about this for ADHD individuals as well as for parents to ADHDers and neurodivergent families. International travel is so fun. I wouldn't say that I am the most traveled person, but I would definitely say I am not the least traveled person. Most of my traveling experiences have been within Central and South America, though a couple years ago, my husband and I did go to Sweden and to London, and that was a great deal of fun. In addition to that, my family as a whole, when we're not internationally traveling, we are traveling a lot within the U.S. So our road trips are often ending up down in San Diego, where I was raised, but we've also traveled to Georgia and, my husband and I, anyway, we've done enough travel. It's something that is actually one of the things that we both really enjoy to do together is experience new cultures and new people and new sites. And we've had a lot of fun doing this. So I wanted to share some of the things that I've learned because this is a really different experience if you have ADHD or if you have a neurodivergent family, if your kids have ADHD, if they have needs that extend outside of neurotypicalville, this is the podcast for you. And I would also say that it doesn't have to look exactly the way that I'm doing it. More than anything, as with most of my podcast episodes, I am here to hopefully normalize the experience so that your expectations are not just realistic, but are honest, and that your expectations don't clash too much with the reality so that you get totally thrown off. If we are prepared and we understand that life is real and it happens and it's pretty unique for the lived experience of ADHD, then when life happens, it doesn't have to throw us off kilter. It simply can just be, and we can accept it as it is and still find our center and still stay grounded and have some compassion for ourselves, even if we do get a little escalated, and have a great time. So among the passports and the flights and the seating arrangements and the snacks that we have to pack and the remembering where the first aid kit is And when do I give my kids their identification in the airport for TSA? What are we going to do with them as we're standing in customs? Are they going to behave? Are they going to, have a panic attack in public? Among all of that, oftentimes as parents, we still say traveling is worth it. And so if you understand that, if that's something that you adhere to and you want to experience with your children, I'm so glad that you are here. I know that for many parents and families out there that have kids with special needs of all different shapes and sizes, this is not an easy decision. And there is no judgment if you choose to stay home, and if just going to the park or going to a neighbor's house feels like a traveling adventure across the whole world. I believe you. And for those of us who can figure out a way to make this happen, I still want you to feel supported. This is not to say that there is a good way or a bad way. It's just to say, if this is your experience and this is what you're choosing, this is what we've learned. All right, so let's hop into this. Traveling internationally with adults. If we can first learn how to experience the trip as individuals with ADHD, as singletons, or maybe in couples with ADHD, it's going to make a lot more sense when we start to talk about it with children and with kids and with families. When I traveled by myself before I had ADHD, life was a little bit different, and how I approached traveling was a lot different than how it is. I think it was a little bit less honest. It was a lot more masked. I communicated what I needed more based upon what I knew other people's expectations were for me, and less on what would actually be a good experience for myself and where my strengths actually existed and where I could utilize myself the most. And that worked for that chapter in my life. And I am so grateful that I got the experience in Peru and in Ecuador and in Mexico. And yet now that I understand my brain and my body a lot more, I can feel a lot more relaxed and excited and prepared for the experience I want to have. And so that's what I want for you, is for you to be able to experience not just what other people want for you, but to know how to advocate and speak up and ask for exactly what you might be needing. So whether you're 19 or 89 and you're hopping on a plane and you're traveling internationally, when we are out of our normal day-to-day routine and places and smells and noises, our nervous system takes note. And sometimes this can lead to minor dysregulations, and other times it can lead to very large dysregulations. The most important part is that we are self-aware and that we don't push it away, but that we are in communication with our body and what is happening. So how we can orient ourselves to where we are really can lower our anxiety. Our brain wants to turn question marks into periods. Okay, what I mean by that is oftentimes when we're operating in a stair map and we have a question in our thought line, okay, so we have a situation come up and we have a thought about it. If that thought is a question, it's going to lead to more work, more anxiety, more overwhelm, or in the case of one of my students today, they said, no, actually just leads me to avoidance. And so if they have enough question marks in their thought line, instead of finding a solution, they're like, it doesn't exist. And then their future self gets angry at them because the thing never gets done, right? So the more that we can change our question mark into a period, even if that period will change and shift, it's at least starting from an anchoring space. So for example, where are we going to be staying? Okay, we'll start with lodging to begin with. I don't know. Where should we stay? Well, we could technically just go to the destination and find a place to stay the day that we're there. Now, is there kind of a gamble there? Yeah, there's some risk taking there, but could we? Probably. Yeah, we probably could, especially if it was a destination that was used to having tourists. And even so, if it's a busy time, that's, it's taking a gamble. So what do? We find a location and we're going to spend the night there, and we book that destination. And what does that do? It closes the loop. We no longer have a question mark there. We have a period there. And this sense of relief that comes when we're able to answer that question. Now, what's really interesting is that part of my vacationing and part of my experiencing the world needs to not be overscheduled. And I still pack a lot of stuff in, but I enjoy pointing my body into a particular direction and then allowing experiences to happen on the way to that location. And this is really good for an ADHD brain because it craves novelty, but it needs structure. So it needs to move from period to period, but it can find some adventure within the middle. And not overscheduling also helps us to not be disappointed when things don't go just so. Leaving enough flexibility and time in between our periods that we're putting at the end of our events really does help a great deal. So we write a loose day-by-day plan, and we leave the really thick periods on the page for the most essential things: our flights, our lodging, our car rentals, any restaurants that are on our must-do list that need reservations, if we're meeting up with people that we know, and they, requiring their flexibility is not a part of what we're experiencing. We really want to nail that type of stuff down. Let me think if there's anything else. I just feel like those are some of the main big period marks. Everything else then becomes a menu option within that sphere. So, for example, my husband and I went to Sweden a couple years ago, and we took the flight. We knew who was going to pick us up, how we were going to get from our place to where we were staying, how many days we were going to be there, which airplane was then going to take us from Sweden to London, how many days we were going to be there, where we were going to be staying, who we were going to meet up with, and where we were going to meet up with them. And then I had a menu of options of things that we could do in the meantime. Okay, we had historical sites that would be fun to see in Sweden. We had restaurants and foods that we wanted to try. We had people we wanted to see and spend time with. And we had a handful of different things that were possibilities. And so based upon how we were feeling and our energy level and just how we were feeling out in the day, we could decide from that list. Notice that I didn't leave it just completely blank. I didn't have nothing there. I had a menu, and menus work really, really well with people with ADHD because it constrains the amount of decision that we can make. We still feel autonomous. We still feel like we're not being bossed around by our own schedule. We still feel like we have choice and decision, but it's not up to us and the possibility of the stars. It's not just so big that we can't grasp it. That really helps us narrow in on what is best. And then we also don't feel like we have FOMO because we're looking at a short list of some incredible options that we can choose from. And in doing that, we're really helping us up. That when I talk about flexible structure, that's what I'm talking about. I also like visuals. So while words are great on a page, I love visuals, something tangible that I can hold. I like to print out screenshots so I can visualize the places I'm going to be living in. And also visualization helps me with my memory. So dates and times and places. For some reason, it really helps me connect it. It might be part of my dyslexia. So uncertainty isn't actually the problem. But if we're uncontained uncertainty, right? We don't have a container that's going to keep that uncertainty to a limit, then we start to really feel the overwhelm. And that's why when you're, for example, cleaning a bedroom, if you can start with the laundry and you get the laundry busted out, you have that feeling of relief in that area. Or you organize a desk or drawers in a desk, you're feeling relief with each step. Essentially, that's what we're wanting to do. Now, Camden, how is this different from normal planning? Well, normal planning is a to-do list. What we're actually doing is we're pre-planning for our ADHD experience. Everything is intentional based upon our nervous system and what our brain isn't going to remember for us, how it's not going to regulate for us. And when we do that, we're going to be a lot more in tune as to what we're going to choose for our menu items, what kind of places we're going to choose for our lodging. We're going to be more honest about how much gap in time we need between places that we're at. We're going to measure it by attuning ourselves to our body and the experience that we're having there. Okay, familiarity is regulation. So when I was traveling to South America and Central America, I would often bring big groups of teenagers down there and we do service. And for some reason, there were two things that were always comforting foods. That was beef jerky and Starbursts. And what I liked about both of those is beef jerky had high protein that was clean and safe for me to eat. And Starbursts didn't melt too bad. And you could buy a really big bag of them. And to me, like, they could last for a long time. And they just reminded me of home. They were like a comfort food, a little burst of dopamine, sugar. Beef jerky, same thing. It was sustaining energy for me, and it was clean. And I did get sick in Ecuador and in Peru, from the water, from the food. I'm not quite sure, but it's not a fun experience. And when you're feeling like that, and then you're questioning the food you're about to eat, it just makes it even worse. So I was thankful to at least have some protein sources that helped with that. So you can use food. You can bring your own pillowcase. You could bring a really cozy hoodie that you're going to bring, or make sure you have some pre-downloaded podcasts that you really like to enjoy. While I am alone or with my husband and I'm traveling, I do really like to separate myself from my day-to-day life, but it's nice every so often for me to tap into my happy place. And there are a few channels on YouTube that I like to listen to that just can help me feel centered again, that are very meditative. And those have been really helpful also to help me fall asleep in new places. So remember that novelty is exciting. I'm all about that. But too much newness can be destabilizing. And that's not brave. That's not someone who's not courageous. That's someone who's got their head screwed on appropriately and is mature within their ADHD body. And I think this is precisely what managing our ADHD looks like. It doesn't mean that we're not doing fun things. It means that we're in fact able to tap into a more rich and solid and anchored level of enjoyment, because we aren't sacrificing the exact elements that make life feel safe and fun and adventurous. Regulation can create capacity for adventure, in other words. So I am a person who will jump 2 feet in most of the time. I want to go full immersion. And I don't think that I don't want to do that, but I need to make sure that I'm still choosing in to that based upon where I'm going and how much I want to push myself outside of my zone of tolerance. I have to know that there are consequences for that. When I travel to Spanish-speaking countries, I speak Spanish. I know I'm very familiar with most of Spanish-speaking culture, while they do vary. And to put me into that and to push me outside of my zone of tolerance is going to take a lot more than if I travel to China someday. I don't speak Chinese. I am less familiar with their culture and their customs. I'm less familiar with their alphabet and reading. And so I have to understand that full immersion will feel different based upon where I am traveling. And it's not a problem, but the way that I go about the experience is meant to be thought through. And it doesn't make me any more courageous or strong or adventurous. I get to ask myself, how am I going to have the best experience for the exposure that I want to go through? And that's, once again, I just feel like that's growing up. That's maturity. And I'll talk about this, I think, when we're talking about kids, but it is okay to eat comfort foods in addition to authentic foods in different places. You don't have to only eat authentic foods. It's okay. I'm giving you permission. Your nervous system will thank you. And I think sometimes for the sake of the novelty, we push ourselves too fast, too much. We end up getting sick or so dysregulated or so out of sorts that we lose the whole experience. So just expand the zone of tolerance, but we're not here to prove that we're Superman or something. Remember, we chose this vacation so we can decide how we're going to do it. If you are feeling overwhelmed and sad, I remember the first time we traveled to El Salvador, we went with some friends, and Tyler and I, my husband and I, went as a return to his mission. And I was just, we didn't have kids at that time. I was gung-ho to go explore this country. Well, it was a really dangerous time, and we were staying at the beach. Well, the beach would be really nice for a beautiful, relaxing vacation, but I didn't come to El Salvador to relax and put my feet up. We came to go back and see his areas and to be with the people. And so we had two different expectations for this trip. And so within the first day and a half, I became really frustrated and kind of got a little bit moody, in all honesty. And there were hormones and things involved at that point. We were going through infertility and all this stuff. But in addition to that, we just sometimes need to give ourselves some time to settle in. And if we can have a good buffer built into our travel to settle in, to have a slow start, to let ourselves and our body reacclimate, we're going to have a better experience. It's just going to feel better because it's already worked in. So we're not ever falling behind and losing time. That FOMO isn't so loud. We are essentially just settling in exactly where we need to be. We're recalibrating to where we're at. That actually, we'll talk about this again when we talk about parenting and kids. When you can have a good understanding of what to expect from the trip, that trip to El Salvador, the first time, I had no idea what we were going to do. It was very much in the air. All we know is that we were going with our friends, and that was really it. We didn't have a plan. And I recognized in myself that when I don't have a plan, I get into scarcity. I'm afraid that the time isn't going to be used wisely. I'm afraid that I'm not going to know how to make the most of the time, because transitions are really tricky as well, between, if I want to put my feet up in a hammock and read a book, and then I get really into the book, and then we're asked to hurry and get our bags together and go somewhere that I didn't know and wasn't expecting. That feels really crunchy to me. That feels very uncomfortable. And so what do we end up doing? We end up walking around in limbo and never doing anything. And so if we can have a loose outline as to what's going to be happening over the next few days, even if we're traveling as adults, if we can make those decisions ahead of time, we're really able to be more present, because the future is already taken care of it for itself. It's already been planned to a degree. Remember that discomfort and feeling uncomfortable, if you aren't as familiar with traveling internationally, discomfort doesn't always mean trauma. Discomfort doesn't always mean something is bad or even that you're dysregulated. Discomfort simply means that you're outside of your comfort zone. And when you can still find your breath, you can still find yourself outside of your comfort zone, you're good, man. Okay. And so when you're experiencing all these new things and we don't have a prefrontal cortex that regulates it and, puts it back together, they can go one of two ways or a spectrum of different ways. We can go to whoa, this is so incredible. And our mind is so inspired, and it can expand because it feels safe, and it feels safe with this newness, and the dopamine is flooding, our brain, and we're just totally inspired by this new place. Or we can feel completely the opposite. And we feel really trapped and uncertain and scared and anxious. and then anything in between, of course. All of those point to the experience of being in newness, and anything that you experience within that spectrum is completely fine. But the more important thing is that you understand it for yourself. Dysregulated means panic, anxiety, fear. Growth feels like a rubber band where we're stretching, we're molding, we're shifting, and we want to shoot a little bit more for that rubber band experience. But if we do start to feel the dysregulation experience, if you can reframe that and say, hey, brain, I know that we're starting to feel expanded and scared, and this is what we signed up for. So remember, you are safe. Remember, you have great intelligence. You're going to figure things out. You're going to use your tools. You're going to use Google Translate. You're going to use, whatever you need. I can stretch here without flooding my body and feeding that anxiety and feeding that nervousness. I can be more of the rubber band and less of the panicked individual. So if we can help ourselves out in those ways, we're going to know how to plan. We're going to know how many outfits to pack. One of the funny things that I've learned over time is we can always plan for a certain situation, but you come home and you're like, man, I kind of overpacked a little bit. And I'm like, well, a lot of time that's because we didn't know the weather. We didn't know what we were going to experience. So better to be a little bit overprepared, not a lot, but a little overprepared, and know that when you come home, you're going to think you overpacked on a couple items, than to feel completely underprepared. But on the same caveat and the same side of the coin, or other side of the coin, but the same coin, is that I will always ask myself, unless you are going like really, really, really off grid, I can purchase it there. And it might have to be more expensive, and it might not be exactly what I need, but I am moldable, I am flexible, and I can figure things out. And maybe I'll figure out a new way, to do this thing. But it's like both sides. Yes, I want to be a little bit more overprepared than not, but even so, I can make it work in the situation. It's amazing just how much we don't need. And still how nice it is to have just what we want, just what we want. So being mindful and taking time to do that is helpful. ADHDer, please make a packing list. Please print it up, work with ChatGPT, AI, whatever it is that you're listening to this podcast, when you're listening to this, write lists down, share lists with your spouse, because maybe you've gained information that they haven't. Maybe you're packing a raincoat that they didn't know they were supposed to pack, etc. Write things down, because when we externalize things, then we can see where there's missing pieces and holes. So I would say, I have to kind of do things in generalities here, but all of that has been really helpful. Now you're going to know the things like packing earplugs or noise canceling headphones, hand sanitizer, and baby wipes. Like, you can Google all of that stuff, but I'm here to really speak to this neurodivergent piece, this piece that wants flexible structure, that wants to know just enough but needs a little bit more novelty. This part that doesn't want to operate off of 1,000 different question marks, but is really looking for anchors with periods at the end of the sentences, where they can jump from anchor to anchor and have some fun in between. Okay, we're going to shift over to traveling internationally with neurodivergent kids. And this is a whole different experience, and it's still a lot of fun. For us, it's not so much about the travel as logistics. I can take care of myself mainly when I have ADHD. Certainly there are ways that I can travel that will be more suited for my ADHD brain versus others. But we don't really have that liberty when we are hauling our kids around with us, especially if they are neurodivergent. So currently I have all my kids in the next season here will be turning 13, 12, 10, and then I have a 4 turning 5-year-old. And so we just went to El Salvador, and then last weekend we went to St. George for 4 days, and this past summer We did like a 2-week long road trip up to Idaho and Oregon and down through Yosemite and San Francisco and down to San Diego and back to Utah. And so that is a whole different experience. In some ways, traveling down to El Salvador was almost easier than the road trip for 2 weeks here in the Western United States, because what you get, right? All we had was a backpack and a carry-on suitcase and what you could fit in there. And so you get kind of creative about how you're going to spend your time. Let's hop in. Okay. I love the idea of you have stewardship over all these little nervous systems. So it's not just plans and hotels, but also you are there to make sure that they feel safe and protected, and that they can trust you to take care of them in these very, very new situations. So I am going to, for those of you on YouTube, I'm holding up this little pamphlet that I made for my kids. And the front just says El Salvador. And then when you open it up, it has all of our tickets. And mind you, this is not just for my children, is it? This is for me, 1000%. This is a tangible little booklet. It has all of our flights, and it has some lines that they can write in. It has a photo of the car we're going to rent and our Airbnbs and what those look like. It has a photo of the places that we're going to visit day by day and the timing that we're going to use. It has plan B. There's some plan Bs in there. It has a picture of the beach that we'll be near and the beds inside of our beach house that we rented. There's the picture of the temple we're going to visit and kind of the hostel that we stayed in. And then if we go all the way to the back, I even went so far as to print and assign seating so that everyone got a window seat on an equal amount of time, and they just put their initials in those seatings. Was that a little bit over the top? Maybe. But when we have extra kids, we get to be extra. And this, as a mom, this was my outsource of my own brain, but also I could outsource my own brain to who? To my husband, to my kids. And so if they had questions, I say, have you looked it up in the book yet? Have you read about it in the book yet? Once you've read about it in the book, let me know if you have any more questions, or ask Dad if there's any more questions that you have. And so now I wasn't the only one, even though I did most of the trip planning, I wasn't the only one who knew all the stuff. And they could ask themselves, do I really want to know this? Or am I just asking this for the sake of asking a question? Because it will wear you down as a parent to be asked that many questions. Now, recently we just realized that one of my daughters also has OCD, and something that I learned about OCD, or generalized anxiety, but particular OCD, is their need for reassurance. And so that might sound like, are you sure it's going to happen? Are you sure this is the right place? How do you know this is the right place? What if we da-da-da-da? What if it's the wrong place? They need this constant reassurance. And so having that pre-planned in here makes it feel official. Yes, we confirmed it. Here's the address. Here's what it looks like. So then when we open up, the doors from the street and we say, oh my gosh, that's the exact house that matches the house in my book. It is the reassurance of things to come and that are. It just helps our little people, and it helps us out so much. So like I said, there's photos of things. There's a simple daily outline, time blocks, a page for questions. Reduced repetitive questions come from that. Lowered my decision fatigue, which was already honestly very high. Gave them autonomy. They got to be participants in this trip. Helped them know ahead of time what things were. If you feel oriented to the space you're in, your body's going to feel a lot more regulated. Okay, so also we packed toilet seat covers. This is a big difference, okay? If you have people in your family that are germaphobes, that have real anxiety around germs, that was a really great one. We had hand sanitizer in like every backpack. We had snacks once it was afternoon and we were traveling in every backpack so that they could manage that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I had a Ziploc bag that if they wanted to put little treasures they found along the way, they could put in there so that they had some autonomy and felt like they could experience everything the way that they wanted to. In addition to that, so what else we have? We had these really cool sticker books. So I found some kind of dynamic sticker books for my tweens that are like sticker by number. And then another one that was like create a collage. It was kind of cool and Halloween-y looking. And then my daughter had one that has these stickers that you can do these scenes. And then on the other side, it's a coloring book. So it's a great activity book. Then I found something novel. I purchased a magazine for each one of them to have in their backpack. So something kind of novel and cool. And I spent, the week before uploading movies and shows onto iPads and Kindles and books. We uploaded a lot of books onto their Kindles and as well. And then I think each one of them brought like one or two real like books that they brought for themselves. And then eventually they started sharing and passing around to each other. So I'm sure there were a couple other things, but once again, this is like a curated experience for a neurodivergent brain. What's going to keep, we had like little fidgets and stuff too. What's going to keep their attention, but not be too heavy? What's going to be novel with each page that they turn? That's why I kind of like these sticker books that you could make look at 1,000 different ways, right? It was endless possibilities and they're really cool looking. They weren't anything you could just go buy at the store. So just think about that. I totally prioritized downtime. So we did a lot of movement in the first couple days in El Salvador, but then we stretched out some good downtime at the beach. And we had the opportunity to go to the El Salvador Library, which is like one of the best libraries in the world right now. But our kids and my husband and I, we needed downtime. We needed rest. And so we chose to do that instead. And that was kind of a hard no to say because we were going to meet up with a friend. I'm so glad we did it. I'm so glad we trusted that process of being at home base, just unscheduled time, go to the beach when we wanted, get in the pool when we wanted, no real agenda, having a lot more margin to process what was happening and just to exist and to be in a beautiful place. And then I did my best to not judge screens. So we would only have screens when we were traveling, but that was a lot because it took us 24 hours to get down there. We had to take 3 planes. The tickets were less expensive that way. That's why we went on this trip in the first place. And so I just tried to not judge myself. They will be in a beautiful new place and it will be inevitable that they will learn a lot of things in being in a brand new country. So on the way there, sure, use screens. And then we allowed them to watch, a screen of something in the afternoon after the beach. They just needed to settle in. Another thing to consider is that everything was in Spanish and they don't speak Spanish. So hearing something in their own language was also very regulating, emotional decompression. And then right before we were going to get to a place, about a half hour before, we'd ask that they had all get off their screens and start to look out the windows. And of course, every time they started to fight and to bicker, but at least it wasn't fighting and bickering for 3 hours because my child won't be looking at a screen. Well, in my opinion, we aren't in the 1990s. These kids are different. And in El Salvador is not the time to teach how to regulate without a screen if you're only going to be there for 5 days. That was not my point of going. The point is that they would be able to experience, and they were able to experience so much better once they had that time to have that downtime. We also had a gradual cultural stretch for them too. We brought mac and cheese and top ramen and beef jerky, some of their favorite candies. We shopped at grocery stores that had some of their familiar foods, but then we also ate the locals' foods. We went to all different kinds of pupuserias. We bought tamales on the street. We went to some of their restaurants, and some of them were a little bit more formal restaurants. Others were like, the backyard pupuserias or whatever. And they were stretched by those experiences, but they weren't so flooded. They were able to come back. Okay, here's a peanut butter and honey sandwich. Okay, here's some ramen noodles. Okay, here's an orange, whatever it might be. And that really does matter because these little brains are already underdeveloped. They're already very flexible. and they're taking in so much than we can even understand because they are so young. It was so cool to see how quickly they started picking up on the language, even in the 6 days that we were there. And it's okay for them to feel at home, right? Like, this isn't the time in their life that they necessarily need to be fully immersed. Now, if that was your intention, you might go about this completely different, but it wasn't our intention. Our intention was to go back for them to see a new country with people that we loved and to see where their dad served his mission and to connect in real time and with their bodies to that place. Okay. So they had ownership over their carry-on bag and their backpack. It was simple, manageable, and I think they felt very empowered by that too. It was pretty cute. 2 of our girls that are in middle school actually did like a travel log, like a vlog, and they compiled that at the end too. And I wish that I would have had them take their screens out more to record themselves because it was so cute. In the moment, it kind of felt like, ugh. If I'm being honest, but no, it was so darling. I'm so glad that they did it. And now they have their cute, young voices and how they experienced that trip in a video. And that's really special. So it's cool. Okay. So about a month before we got there, we did tell them about they needed bottled water to brush their teeth. They weren't supposed to drink the water, that they were going to be throwing the toilet paper in the trash. And we didn't tell them. Like, we knew about this trip for a year, but we didn't tell them so early that it was going to bug them and they get anxious about it. We didn't tell them so late that they were like panicked by it. So I felt like 2 to 3 weeks was enough time. I always brought a familiar first aid kit. There's just something about like Band-Aids and kids chewable ibuprofen and like just with the normal packaging that it just, I don't know, it feels familiar to them. And some of the things might be harder to find. Thankfully, even in Central America, they have most of the same stuff that we have here. But I know that would be different in other countries too. It just felt really nice to know that we had our medications and everything in one place. And that thing came with me everywhere we went. Sunscreen. They had a lot of aloe vera there, the plants. We just cut it off and used it. I think overall, as we're just kind of finishing this up, we don't need to force them to be tough. We don't need to shame them if they're feeling uncomfortable. We don't need to prioritize full immersion over the safety of the nervous system. We want them to want to do this again, right? And discomfort builds capacity, but dysregulation shuts it down. And so I'm hoping that as you see, like with preparation, with margin, with flexibility, that these neurodivergent brains, yours included, can do brave and beautiful things without pushing themselves so far that they never want to go back. We want them to go back. Be gentle, right? In that non-regulated prefrontal cortex or poorly regulated, we like to swing that pendulum to one side or the other. And it's hard for us to find that middle zone. Know that about yourself. And give yourself permission to live in this beautiful middle zone, to push those borders of the zone of tolerance just a bit and bring it back in, just a bit and bring it back in. This is going to create trust and safety and a beautiful experience for everyone. Thanks so much for being here with me today. Know how much I love you, and I am always, always cheering you on. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Busy Brain Saint podcast. If you're eager to explore the world of ADHD coaching, make sure to connect with me on Instagram at Camden_ADHD or visit my website, CamdenADHDcoaching.com. For more LDS-specific ADHD content, don't forget to follow this podcast and join us on Instagram at The Busy Brain Saint. Listen, I'm here to support you on your journey. I cannot wait to have you as a part of our community. Stay engaged, stay inspired, and remember, you're not alone here. Thanks for being a part of the Busy Brain Saint family.